Welcome to another episode of the Sexuality Scale Project podcast. This episode, I'm speaking to my very first person in an open marriage, a bisexual singer-songwriter that has a husband, a dog, and a girlfriend. We talk about navigating feelings and respect in an open marriage, especially as a highly sensitive person, the spectrum of being bisexual, psychedelics, and Dan Davage. So welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, and thank you for doing this with me. I usually start with the basics. So we'll go over age, gender, and where you're from. But it's also, if you want, anonymous. So if you don't want to give too many details, then that's up to you to share. So how old are you?
I am in my late 30s. Wow, almost 40. I am from the States, but I live in Lithuania now. I've been there for a few years.
Okay. How did you end up there?
I ended up in Lithuania because my husband is a scientist, and we just decided to take the plunge so that he could start a lab there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So how would you say what your sexual orientation is?
I would definitely say that my sexual orientation would be bisexual. But I wouldn't say that, throughout my whole experience of life that I would have been able to name that fully. But I would say over the last few years, it's become more obvious that it's bisexual.
What I find interesting about bisexual or pansexual people, because everything is kind of on a spectrum, I would say. So where on the spectrum of bisexuality, I think people assume bisexuals are 50-50, right? That's the assumption. So where on the spectrum would you see yourself of maybe romantic, bisexual?
I would say that over time it's shifted, because like you said, it is a spectrum. I would say that I started off perhaps more the higher percentage of men and women I didn't have as much experience with, and I felt a little intimidated to move into that space more fully, and that interfaced with my experiences, that inner perhaps intimidation, although I did have different experiences. And then once I moved around the world and settled a little bit, it kind of opened up more for me. Women kind of rose higher and higher and higher, and now I would say that it's actually higher than men. Although it's like you're saying, that's not like a 50-50 thing. It's really hard to quantify it. But at this point, I would say it's much higher for women.
Is it?
Yeah.
So the percentage would be more for women than men. However, you're married to a man.
Yeah.
Okay. So how does he know?
He does know that.
How does he feel about that, though?
I think he feels a little insecure knowing that. There's a part of him that feels like, oh, maybe I'm going to leave him and be monogamous with a woman or something. But that doesn't feel true for me. That doesn't feel like something that I would want. Because it isn't that I'm not attracted to him or don't want to be with him. It's just that over time, my lens has shifted more. My world has opened more. And my relationships with women have deepened more. So I think that he understands that. Yeah.
How was your, I can imagine that your communication together must really tune in on that as well.
Yeah. We have very regular relationship check-ins that we use using a model from the Multi-Amory podcast, if you know of it. And so essentially we're going over on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis, whatever fits our schedule. We're going over many different topics, from dating each other, other relationships, which also includes friendships as well. Sex, money, work, art. We're both musicians, so art and music shows up there too. So we're in pretty constant dialogue about all of these things.
Right. And just to clarify, because also for the listeners, you are in an open marriage, correct?
Yes.
Is that how would you define it?
That's how I would define it. In an open marriage, obviously, before we were married, we I would say that we considered it more monogamish, like the Dan Savage term that he coined, bless him, but which meant that we were not as fully, and especially myself, I was not as fully fleshed out in my openness. But yeah, since moving to Lithuania, I think maybe there was something about the distance of being away from the States. I'm not sure entirely what it was, just the right timing. Then I would say it turned more into an open marriage, yeah.
I think when you are away from home or where you grew up or everything familiar, then you do probably feel a bit more comfortable to come out. That happened to me as well. So I think you feel a little bit more braver to become your authentic self, I would say. So how about everything? So the bisexuality, but also your open marriage, are you to your surroundings, to your family and friends, and how does that work?
I would say that to my friends, especially my closest friends, they all know I talk about it all the time. It's just this common knowledge. Even, some people at work, they know as well. But I would also say that, only one of my family members knows. The rest don't. I don't necessarily think it's that they would care or anything. It's just that I haven't told them, and I don't know if I will. It's kind of like on a need-to-know basis in a way.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then I have some random questions just about you, and then we'll go back to the marriage and how that works, because I'm very interested in that. How do you feel about one-night stands? Have you had one-night stands? Can you do them?
I am not very interested in one-night stands at this point in my life.
But before, also when you were younger?
Before, I have had them, yes. I would say maybe when I was more in my hippie days, my more hippie days. I don't know how to say this. I'm still pretty hippie in mindset. Yeah. Yes, I would say in the past that I have had them, although not very many. And I felt mostly okay in the moment, but the thing is that it feels like my heart is very big. I'm also a very highly sensitive person, like an HSP. And so over time, I've recognized that it doesn't work very well for me. But in the past, I think I was able to kind of compartmentalize it somehow.
Yeah. I think I think I've said this before, we're all brought up with the idea that, everybody's capable of doing it, when in fact that's actually not true. I cannot do it either. It's not for me. I'm also a very sensitive person, so I think that might correlate. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So whenever you have these one-night stands, did you ever feel uncomfortable, or afterwards, did you kind of regret it, or were you kind of okay with it? Because I
was kind of okay with it at that point in time, thinking back to different experiences. I think that I was very sheltered growing up. So for me, it was an exciting thing just to experience it. And so I didn't feel a lot of residue around it at that point in time. I was just like, okay, add it to the list of things that I have experienced. So no, I don't think that I I think about it in terms of like stickiness or residue. Like I didn't have any like real emotional residue.
Right. That's interesting, because I was going to ask about like the emotional connection. Like, do you think you need, because I'm a demisexual, I know I need to have, and even if is for coincidentally a one night stand, I do need to feel like some emotional connection to someone.
Yes.
There needs to be some kind of, I don't know, like spark or something that, you can kind of feel it.
Yes. I'm very much like that.
Yeah. So then one night stands are hard, because how can you do that in a couple hours of meeting someone?
It's definitely a lot harder. You would have to go into it really understanding that this is the container of what this is, and then it has an endpoint, and then you just move on. And in my case, you write a song about it.
Same. Whole albums.
Which is what has happened.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's how you process it, right?
Yeah.
So
songwriting is my therapy. So
exactly. Yeah. That's what I used to tell people when I was on stage. Therapy session with Hannah. So then I would say then romance, love, all the gooey feelings are kind of important for you.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to just sex.
Yep.
Do you have, like, since you're in an open marriage, do you have like any casual relationships, or is it always something around love, like something around more an emotional bond with someone?
My two main relationships are, to my mind, like, very romantic and sexual, and have a strong foundation. There are some events that are held in Lithuania, like queer spaces, that happen maybe twice a year. And so there's one person that I would say is kind of like, I don't know what you would call her. She's an acquaintance of mine, but you could call her like a play partner of sorts.
Okay.
But even her, I would not say it's not casual. Like I get lunch with her sometimes. Like she's somebody that I actually know and see every once in a while.
Even outside of the sexual realm, you mean? Yeah. So you have a bond.
I have a bond with her. Yeah. But it's very those are very rare for me. Those types of experiences.
So would you then, is it your relationship or your marriage then polyamorous, would you say? Because you said you had two, like, so your husband, I would assume.
Yeah.
And then another partner, right?
Yeah,
and that's a solid, like, but he does not have a relationship with her. It's a woman, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And she does not. So it's just you.
They're friendly. They see each other often. I'm sure they have their own text thread that very rarely has anything to do with me and is probably just sending jokes back and forth with each other. I think the only time they talk about me is sometimes I will be, if I'm in a sad mood, then I'll ask my husband, will you send her a message just so she can say hi and like send me something, like something that will make me happy? And he's like, sure. So every once in a while I'll come up in that way, but most of the time I don't think I do. So yeah, I would say that I am more poly, and just because of that. My husband is more interested in novelty, although with some sort of emotional depth. So I would say something closer to friends with benefits. I think that he would be open to having more of a relationship, but it's not his top priority.
So yeah, so that was going to be my question. Like, has he explored anything outside?
Oh yeah, and that was kind of, when we first met and we were more monogamous, he was far more exploratory. He was far more exploratory than I was, and
was he?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but for him it was more of like when he was traveling, when he was out and in different places in the world, and then he would come back to me, and my experiences were more stunted with people that I already knew. So yeah, it was very different. Now at this point, it's much more. I'm much more active, I would say.
Okay.
Not that he's not active. It's just I'm more active in terms of, the depth of it, the romanticism. And he's never been as interested in that. He's more interested in the novelty of it. But over time, he's come to understand that even if it's, friends with benefits, the way he's explained it to me is he wants it to be, just someone that he cares about. He's not a robot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So he needs an emotional connection as well. But for him, it might be more of a sexual thing then.
For sure, it's way more sexual.
Like he's not looking to have other relationships outside of the relationship with you.
No. Yeah, the way that he's described it is that he already has me for that. And I think that he would be okay if something turned into that, but that's not what he's looking for.
Yeah. So that would just be spontaneous. Okay. So tell me about, would you say with also your girlfriend, like, is there anything, is there anything kinky? Like, do you guys have a kink? Like, is that why she's there? Or even with your husband? Like, is there something specific around that?
I don't think that there's any specific kinks. It's interesting because my girlfriend and I were just talking about this 2 days ago. I think with my husband, we're interested in shibari, rope tying, things like this, like the dynamics of that. With my girlfriend, it's far more fluid than that. Both of us feel that way about kinks. Like it isn't something that I could even name to you. Like these are my 12 kinks.
Yeah.
It's more like along some sort of nuanced spectrum where in the moment, if I'm exploring with her, then there's some sort of dynamic, like a push and pull thing that will happen, or some I don't know exactly what teacher vibes, doesn't matter, like things like this. But it's not something that I was, to answer your question, like outwardly looking for, like in another partner, like because I know that that's why some people look outside, partnerships. I mean, for to be transparent, that's part of like what my husband is looking for, because he has more specific things. Some I don't, even really know about. Other things that, I'm just not as interested in. So I'm like, okay, go have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for me personally, no, there's not anything specific.
So who actually wanted to open up the relationship? Who started the conversation?
Both of us.
Oh, really?
Talked about it on our second date.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very, very early on. We were both like, hey, have you heard of Dan Davage? Yeah. Okay. So then we just immediately started on the route.
Can you explain who Dan Davage is?
He's a sex and relationship columnist and podcaster based out of Seattle, I think. And he has been, is writing for a very long time, answering advice from different people, for different people rather. And he's been doing it in a podcast format for many, many years now. And I don't listen to it so much. But I would say that he was very formative for me to help me to be able to kind of normalize openness.
Right.
Yeah.
So when did you start listening to him? Like a long time ago already?
It had to have been maybe 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So well before the marriage, and this kind of what bonded you as well? Okay, that's really nice.
Yeah, so we have been like this, for a long time. It's just that it's, as with any long-term relationship, you have communications. And as you've already heard, we have many communications.
And as I've seen.
Communication. What'd you say?
And as I've seen today.
Yeah, exactly.
We stay in touch. Well,
Stay in touch.
That's very good.
My girlfriend and I stay in touch as well. Even right now, what I'm wearing a sweatshirt that my girlfriend gave me underneath here. Then this is my husband's jacket. So.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. So like they stick around me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cute. But it's nice to know that you already, like, from the start, like, kind of bonded over this thing that you kind of went into together. I think most couples, I don't want to generalize because I don't like to generalize.
They open up later.
They open up later. They start into a monogamous thing But that's kind of also why I'm doing this, because I think a lot of people, when they go into a relationship, they don't have that self-awareness yet, or they have never really thought about it until they are in a committed relationship, and then they're like, maybe I'm not as monogamous as I thought I would be.
Uh-huh.
And the problem with that, which it's sad. I mean, it's not their fault because they never really thought about it before, is that maybe they are in a relationship with a monogamous person. They are not monogamous. And then, then basically the shit hits the fan, and that's where the issues start.
Yes.
And I think that's why it's so good and nice to hear that you already had these conversations on your second date. And I think that's very healthy. When I watched Love is Blind, for example, I applaud the people. And interestingly, it was the Brazilian one where people immediately went in with these type of questions. Like they immediately went to talk about sex. They immediately were talking about like, how do you see the relationships? And, it was really from the get-go. And I was sitting very impressed. Whereas for other cultures, they don't really talk about that. They talk about what they really want, like what their dreams are. But it's all very traditional, like, I want that marriage and I want the kids.
Yeah.
So, little bridge there. What about kids?
Yeah. Over time, initially we had talked about potentially adopting, even when we first met. Over time, it was something that I kind of moved further away from, just by way of living life. Over time, I moved away from it just because I was living my life so fully. I wasn't even considering it really anymore, except in the back of my mind. He brought it back up at one point, and then I kind of had to deliberate with myself. I even went through a program that was called Motherhood. Is it for me? I chose to do it for 4 months. Very intense 4 months, just self-led program between myself and my therapist, essentially. Myself and my therapist and maybe a couple close friends. My girlfriend was very helpful actually as well. So then I ultimately, after doing some inner work, realizing that I don't have to parent like my parents did, I decided that this is something that I wanted to do with him. So we are moving into an adoption process for an older girl, but it's still in the beginning phases.
Right.
Yeah.
But also your girlfriend knows this. Does she want to be a part of it all?
Yeah.
Or is this going to be...
She would be totally fine with this. Yeah.
So how would you then, explain to the girl if this all happens and you're successful with the adoption? But how would you, and maybe it's kind of like also explaining to the audience, like how do you explain your relationship?
Relationship or relationships?
Your relationships.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting me.
I think that it would really, as with so many things with children, it would depend on the age of the child that we would have. So you really need to explain based on like the appropriate level of information that they would understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a cop-out answer, but I really think that is truly the answer. So it would really depend. For instance, if they were 6 years old, then I would probably say something closer to a friend or a really good friend. If they were older, then I would give as many details as was appropriate.
Right.
It depends.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. Okay, so where would you then see this grow? Like, the adoption, let's say that's successful. Like, how would your, like, let's do a Love is Blind kind of thing where people are like looking into the future, and how do they see their beautiful future unfold? Like, what would that look like for you?
I think what that would look like for me is having these two foundational partners, and most of all, a foundation within myself. I feel like I have an incredibly strong sense of self. Not just like sense of self-worth, but I trust myself a lot. I understand that I have really good high self-awareness and discernment, course, we all make mistakes, but that's the sort of thing that, like, in the future, I see that sort of, like, benefiting me. So I think that, from day to day, what would that look like is, my husband taking a child to school, perhaps me picking them up. Maybe once a week, I spend time with my girlfriend. She sees them every once in a while, hi, like, so I just see it as kind of not necessarily, like some sort of Pollyanna situation. We all have drama that happens in our lives. It's just how we choose to react to it. But I think that strong sense of self is what's going to benefit me no matter what my future is.
Right. So what kind of conflicts do you have now? Like, what? It all sounds really good and perfect. The way you're communicating with each other and how your relationships are set up right now. But what conflicts do arise?
The biggest conflicts that arise are I have a harder time, or at least in the past, especially, I've had a harder time when my husband is going on dates.
Really?
Yeah. Even though, like, I logically trust him, my body freaks out sometimes, like, and like, explain that to your body. It takes time. You have to have like a self-care first aid kit, like
Right.
toolkit. Luckily I have really good like, what would you call it? Like, coping skills.
Yeah.
And so usually I make plans with friends or with my girlfriend when he's doing this, or if nobody's available, then I'll stay home and, I don't know, read or, make it a night for myself. But it has taken time since our relationship has opened up more and more and more in this new country. It has taken time for me to really, truly understand in my body that he's not going anywhere. Which sounds ridiculous to him. He's like, where would I be going?
Yeah.
I'm here. Like, I'm choosing you every
It's
day.
kind of irrational.
It's super irrational.
That is interesting though, because you're the one with like
With
another full-on
Yes.
partner,
Yes.
and he isn't, and then he goes out on dates.
I think that what really comes into it is me being a highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
Like, I am genuinely an incredibly sensitive person, and it's my superpower. Like, I write incredible songs from it. But it's also really intense sometimes. So in the moment, sometimes I can really like build myself up with anxieties or whatever it may be. Which is why I'm in therapy, like you work on yourself. But it is something that does make non-monogamy harder for me. It's just that I wouldn't give it up either. I wouldn't give up non-monogamy because of that.
Right.
Because I'm a highly sensitive person.
Yeah, but you're also very self-aware.
Yes.
And I think that's the key to anything, to being self-aware, and you work on it. You want that. So you're going to do the self-work to make that happen.
Yes. And there's also a book that I read by Lola Phoenix called The Anxious Person's Guide to Non-Monogamy. And it's a book, but it's also like a workbook of sorts. And so I read that in September of 2023. And I still have my notes for it that I sometimes go back and reflect on if I'm having one of those, higher like peak moments where I'm feeling anxious. And it's really helpful for me to understand that I'm not the only person who experiences this as a non-monogamous person, so much so that an entire book has been written.
True.
About it.
True.
And for it. So that in and of itself helps me to feel less alone in these insecurities or anxieties, fears, however irrational or rational they may be. But for me, they're mostly irrational.
I also think it sounds like you're like really working on it. And I think any relationship takes work. But I think there's an additional thing about being in a poly or open relationship, ethical non-monogamy relationship, where you have to do a little bit of extra work
Yes.
because there's other people involved and other feelings. So you need to constantly check in with each other.
Mm.
With a monogamous relationship, you just check in with one person. But now, there's more. So it sounds like you have a very healthy way of doing it. And I think that's the more successful way to do it. I mean, I do see people online talking about ethical non-monogamous relationships and the discussions that they have. And then there's this kind of opinion of people going like, oh, it's a shit show. Like, but I do think there's a key to it. Could you, from your, what sounds to me like a successful relationships, like give your advice and tips to get there?
I would say it sounds really obvious, but it's true. Be as open and honest as possible, but also go at the speed of the person who's having the most, who's going the slower pace. I'm choosing my words carefully because I'm not wanting to say that one way is better than the other.
Of course.
If somebody's more evolved, because, sometimes I feel that way because my husband, he thinks through things and processes things so much more quickly than I do.
He's a scientist.
But he is a scientist, exactly. I, as I'd mentioned multiple times, am highly sensitive, and I genuinely have to wrestle things sometimes and write songs and talk to my therapist or move my body or whatever it may be. And so he's usually having to go at my pace. And that worked for a really long time. So I think that what's most important is that it's not necessarily that you always need to go at the pace of the slower person. It's just that, especially if you're acclimating to a whole new paradigm shift of relating, that's a really effective way to do it. Because otherwise, there's that term poly under duress. Otherwise, somebody could feel, led by a string, dragged into something when they're not quite ready for it. It took me a long time to get to a place where I can really genuinely feel in my body I trust my husband, I trust my other partner. But that took time. So I think that one of the most important things is to go at the pace of the slower person.
Right.
What I would say. And not in a way that's feels selfish, for that person. You don't want to breed resentment from the other person, but just, even if it's, some amount of time, 6 months, a year, something like this, just to ensure that everybody is on the same page.
But that's also respect.
Yeah, exactly.
That's respect for your partners. This is respect.
Yeah, and my husband, to his credit, did that with me for a long time, and I genuinely appreciate that.
That makes you love him a bit more, right?
I do. I love him so much. Yeah.
So how does your girlfriend then fit in to that speed? Did that matter with her? Or was it more about the speed between the two of you in your marriage?
It was more about the speed between the two of us in my marriage. My husband met my partner on the same day that I did. So we've literally known each other the same exact length of time. And
Did he notice?
Hmm?
Did he notice when you met her that there was something? Did he notice?
No, because I barely noticed it when I met her. I was busy interacting with multiple people. It wasn't until a few months later that it hit me.
Okay.
But I did notice when I met her how empathetic and engaging and I don't know how else to say this. This just sounds like somebody in love, but oh well, I am. Just the sparkle in her eyes I noticed that right away. So, and that was like, that's somebody I want to get to know.
Right.
And it's actually in a similar way that I felt about my husband when I met him. I was just like, I can have really easy conversations with the both of them immediately.
Yeah, so that's just a good match.
It was just a good match. The way my girlfriend describes it is we just vibe.
Yeah, like, and I think when you meet someone and you have that with someone, I think you do know. When you know, you know.
Yeah.
When you know, you know.
You know.
Have you in the past, I always ask this question,
Mhm.
have you ever had an uncomfortable situation sexually?
Yes. I would say that very early on, I had more experiences in this way with men. And I think that they were kind of, we were, they were maybe like kind of like bumbling idiots in a way. Bless them. But, um, and I don't think that in those cases I felt like I understood my own power enough yet to say no. Um, and I didn't, in those cases, I wasn't in any sort of, life-threatening situation. I didn't feel like, you know, and yeah, I guess threatened, physically. But it was the sort of thing where all of those experiences that I have had, while they have not been many, have been with men. It's something that I have thought about from time to time in terms of, well, why am I less interested in men at this point in my life? Um, does that correlate at all?
Probably.
Probably a little bit, even in the back of my mind. Other, men that I dated, when I was with my husband, even, it was, there's just some disappointments there. I didn't feel like they were great communicators, even some who were friends. The only people that I feel like I had positive experiences with then were exes of mine. And so for a long time within, my marriage, the people that I would connect with outside of it was exes of mine because I knew they were good people.
Hmm.
But I eventually learned that learned about myself and felt about myself that it was a crutch of sorts. And that was when I allowed myself to open up more and begin to date my girlfriend in the same city as me. But almost.
So this happened,
Mhm.
sorry, I'm interrupting. So this happened after you moved away, right? So this is in a new country. Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
But did you not have any experiences with women still in the US?
I did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
I did. I did have experiences with women in the US, but I hadn't been in like a relationship,
Yeah, like a committed
a
thing.
committed relationship with anybody since my husband, So yeah, I had some experiences, but most of my experiences were with men.
Right.
I think that, what I was speaking to, when I was younger, then I didn't feel like I had the power to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
But then as I got older, I was able to at least like shift the conversation a bit,
Yeah.
during those moments and be like, what about this instead, So I did kind of grow into my voice. I think that I just began to become more sure of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to nicer stuff.
Yeah.
So what would you say would be the most mind-blowing sexual experience you've ever had in your life?
There's quite a few. Um, Interestingly, they seem to involve a lot of them seem to involve psychedelics.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as I'm thinking about some of my just favorite ones. And I think that that's because my mind is a lot more open. I'm feeling a lot more relaxed in those moments. I feel even more connected with the person that I'm with and more connected to the universe, whatever it is that you deem that as. And I think those are my most favorite moments when it's playful. I could pinpoint it to like one in particular, but I'm actually kind of more interested in like the overarching theme of psychedelics. It feels like in those instances, it feels very playful, but also almost like tantric, like connected to them, myself, and something more. Those are the most mind-blowing experiences for me.
Like being on a different energy level with each other.
Yes.
Like you're kind of tuning in on a different level.
Exactly.
Right.
That's perfectly said. Tuning in on a different level.
Yeah. I get that.
Yeah. Those are like 10 out of 10 my favorites.
I don't do any psychedelic, but I get it.
But you understand. Yeah.
I understand. Totally. Yeah. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Crap. And I wanted to ask another question. I forgot while you were talking about it because I had a visualization of it. Not you having sex, but I mean like of how that must feel.
Expansive.
Expansive?
It feels expansive. Yeah.
You mean expensive in like money?
Expansive. Expensive.
The expanse.
Yeah. Very rich and expansive.
Would that be then kind of like in a play party kind of thing, or this is in your committed relationships that you're doing that? Yeah.
Committed relationships. I am not somebody who does psychedelics well with a bunch of people.
So that was my next question. Like, are you also dabbling in threesomes, orgies, or stuff like that? Is that anything that you are into?
My husband's more into that. For me, I am less so.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly not a top priority for me. It would be so far down on the list. If something like that were to happen, it wouldn't be with my husband. It would possibly be with my girlfriend. I've dabbled in the past, but it's not a top priority.
Right.
But what I can say that I do dabble in is, for instance, those femme queer play parties that happened biannually, I guess.
With your girlfriend together?
No, actually.
But just you?
She's never been at one of the ones that I've been to, at least. Although she's almost come at different times. But I think that what I'm more interested in is just kind of like, this sounds so like hokey, but the power of women exploring pleasure like in the same space. Mm-hmm. That's something that I am far more curious about and interested in and very empowered by. It feels incredibly liberating to me because I had never been in a room where people were talking, not just talking so freely about it, but experiencing things so freely with each other. And then you just, afterwards you go back to being like, oh, hey, how's your day?
Yeah, let's go walk the dog.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, that's kind of what I'm more interested in terms of like a group setting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think your husband's like more for like the play, like the excitement of that, and you're there for the empowerment of it. That's a very interesting. Maybe he feels empowered too. I don't know.
I'm sure he does. I think he does feel empowered by it. It's just that I feel liberated and like affirmed as well. To be fair, I think that he also feels liberated and affirmed, in different ways.
Yeah. Who knew? Lithuania.
Right?
Were you surprised by this? That this was a whole culture thing?
I sure was. I was very surprised by it. And it was so interesting because I met my girlfriend at an event that was like a poly meetup event,
And she's from Lithuania. Yeah, she's Lithuanian. Okay.
Yeah, so she was there, as well as some other people who've become close friends, some of whom attend these, parties that I'm talking about. It's really hard to call it a party, though, because it feels more like a gathering, like I feel like sometimes, play parties, they're given, in my mind, this visual, this idea of them extending like far out into the night, until like 7 a.m. or something. But we've all decided that they're now from like 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. So we don't want to be out super late collectively. So it's more like a gathering.
Yeah, no, I get it. As you get older, you don't want to be out that late anymore. So you want a party to start at like 6 p.m. so you can be home before midnight.
That's right.
Yeah, that's my preferred time slot as well.
Exactly.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to add about yourself that can help empower other people?
Yes. I think that for me, especially since, I'm in Berlin, which is a very queer affirming place. For me, my first time here, I was seeing Boy Genius, that was where I met you. And here I'm on some sort of like queer journey as well. I think that what I want to actually share with people and speak to is kind of back to that moment where I decided that I recognized that I liked this girl enough that I wanted to ask her on a date.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to like offer to people like it's okay to go slow with that. If you're coming from, it's okay to go slow with all of this. Kind of like I was saying, go at the slower pace of whoever that individual is. But in that case, it's okay to go slow. Like you're still being brave by taking 1, 2, 3 steps. And it worked well for me. Like it panned out well for me. She was immediately like, "Wow, you're so communicative and open. Like that never happens with people here." Like, I mean, it does, but I think she was speaking to my being, I don't know, from America or something, just being so friendly and blunt and open. So I think she really appreciated that. So it worked in my favor. But if you're not somebody that is that forthcoming, it's okay to take some slower steps and just allow yourself to be courageous about it, because that level of courage and honesty and hearing my husband also being courageous and honest is what has led to a stronger me and a stronger relationship for us.
Right.
And my girlfriend as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this with me. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for being so open. I hope people listening can take some knowledge and wisdom out of this and have fun in Berlin.
Thank you so much.
Hello again, Hannah here. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Just a kind reminder that this podcast is a passion project of mine to highlight that there's no norm in any level of your sexuality, and this is a conversation we should have with each other, especially when we want to do the nasty, am I right? So I record it, I edit everything myself, and I'm always on the lookout for people to interview. This can also be done remotely, so if you're interested, please don't hesitate to email me at sexualityscaleproject@gmail.com. I repeat, sexualityscaleproject@gmail.com.